Caring less so you can care more is very important. Caring less so you can be the true you. Systems anxiety is very important because I want to find out, is this my true anxiety or is this family anxiety that I'm experiencing? The focus on them should shift to the focus on you, because that will guide you and move you along your path of recovery, maturity, healing, and transformation to finding the true you. Have you ever wondered why you still feel stuck? Even after leaving a narcissistic family or parent? Why does the pain linger? And why do I sometimes feel like I'm repeating the same toxic patterns that I grew up with? I'm Jerry Wise, and for over 45 years, I've helped thousands recover from the grip of narcissistic family dynamics. My mission is to help you break free and build a strong sense of self and live beyond the control of toxic patterns and programming. Let's dive into the key insights you must know to fully heal. Even after you've left the narcissistic family, their influence can linger in powerful ways. Without clarity and intentional action, you may find yourself stuck in cycles of guilt, self-doubt, or even adopting the unhealthy patterns you were trying to escape from. Let me give you 9 key insights you must know to recover. These are the crucial ones. I believe there are more, and I could talk about many more insights, but these I think are very, very critical. Number 1, recognize and resist the family superself. The family superself is the whole clumping the family had in terms of their identity, their emotional life, their mental life. Everything just got all clumped into one. And this family superself is what everyone was partaking of when you were growing up. And you were plugged into it as well. And again, roles are a part of this family superself. So if you're a scapegoat and then you continue on and being a scapegoat as an adult, you're still stuck in the family superself. And you're living out a family superself that ends up being a pseudo self for you. It's not a real self. It's the self you were programmed to have. Learning to resist and unplug from this family emotional field is something that I think is so critical. And because many of your today problems had origins in your family of origin. And even if they don't look exactly the same, the emotional, mental, and relationship dynamics are often there that we learned growing up in our family. And this is for all families. Secondly, healing requires changing your emotional location. For example, I remember I always felt like I was the bad son, or I felt guilty when my mother would say, you need to visit me more often in the nursing home. And by the way, she was mentally there. She had friends coming all the time. I was working full time, and it was very difficult to come more often. I would just be exhausted because I'm also taking care of all the things on the outside for her. And so I did take care of her, and that was really problematic. To come visit more often. I did visit. Well, for mom, it's never as often as she wants you to. And you never do enough, kind of a thing. So I ended up feeling like a bad son. Well, I'm just being a bad son. Because I won't visit mom several times per week, like Stan and Janet do when they visit their mother down the hall. I graduated with them. And she would point out, well, Stan and Janet come all the time. Yeah, well, they're retired. They have land. They have resources. They have property. They had big farms. And they had a different relationship with their mom than our situation. Well, Mom, I guess I'll just have to be the bad son and accept that. But I can be okay with that, Mom. That's an example of shifting an emotional location. Let me give you another example of shifting emotional location. I just did an interview with Ross Rosenberg, and he uses the phrase to observe and not absorb. If you're going into a family situation or a relationship situation and you put on your observer hat, and take off your absorber hat of absorbing all the toxicity, but you're putting on your observer hat, you've just made some detachment and distance within that emotional field. And you've just changed your emotional location. And there are lots of other ways to change that emotional location. And I talk about those in my training and in my online program. And by the way, I might mention, some people have been confused. I have a free training for anyone. 84 minutes. You can see it anytime. The online program does cost. And so people get confused and think I'm saying something's free when it's not. No, there are two different things that I offer. Free training, how to have the self you never were allowed to have, and then the online program, which is Road to Self. And that's a much more involved program. It took a lot of time and effort to do that. So, number 3, stop using dysfunctional thinking to heal. And we can begin to read books like Growing Yourself Up by Jenny Brown, and read books like The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner, and Kathleen Smith, Everything Isn't Terrible. They all think in systems ways, and they also help you get out of the box of your family superself. You're just used to thinking the way the family thinks and the way you were supposed to think. And we want to think in new ways. And I think that's why we go to therapy. That's why we see a coach, to begin to think in new ways rather than just using the same bad thinking that keeps us in a dysfunctional pattern and using that dysfunctional pattern to try to think our way out. It often ends up being just a repeat of the same old problems. And we also tend to recycle the problems over and again. Number 4. Systems anxiety is driving dysfunction. Begin to learn about chronic anxiety. And I don't mean the, quote, mental illness of anxiety. I mean what every family has underneath. And in fact, all of life has an anxious part. And in fact, it's anxiety that actually creates life. And whether it was just two cells coming together and then they join, or two cells or one cell breaking apart into two, it's that biological anxiety that creates that. Well, we have that as well. And this often non-conscious family chronic anxiety, which then creates our reactivity to other people, to issues, to what people say to us, and we become very reactive. So we have this family chronic anxiety that can get triggered. We then become reactive, and then it keeps the same cycle going on and on. And I think it's important to learn about that chronic anxiety and begin to shift that and address that. It's also an anxiety that's a very old part of our brain. It's the fight or flight. People will call it that. We needed fight or flight, 1,000,000 years ago when we were living as cavemen or whatever. We needed that process. Now, in many ways, that process can get in our way now, because I don't have a lot of tigers or leopards or snakes after me anymore. That I don't live in a world where I need that same level and amount of anxiety. And all families have that as well. And I think it's important to learn about that. Also, the anxiety that comes from trauma anxiety from our family. And again, this anxiety as being programmed, anxiety then creates and is triggered, then creates reactivity, and then we're just into this whole repeated cycle again. And so I think learning about family chronic anxiety is very important for recovery. And in fact, her book, Kathleen Smith's Everything Isn't Terrible, she talks about that, and I would recommend you take and read that book. Number 5, inner boundaries are everything. Because inner boundaries, and whenever I say inner boundaries, think detachment, emotional detachment. Caring less so you can care more is very important. Caring less so you can be the true you is very important as well. I think one of the things that's really important about inner boundaries, and inner boundaries are also a way to shift our emotional location in the family pattern puzzle mobile, if you remember the mobiles from grade school, art class, and you pull on one and it shifts everybody. Well, I want to shift my emotional location in that system. And so systems anxiety is very important because I want to find out, is this my true anxiety or is this family anxiety that I'm experiencing? And that those anxieties are important to address. Number 6, healing is an internal process. It's not about changing other people. And I think that's really, really important to learn. Stop trying to change your family. Stop trying to change your husband, your wife. It's time to deal with your internal process. By the way, I'm not saying stay in an abusive relationship. I'm not saying stay in a severely malignant marriage. You have a partner who's a malignant narcissist. No, you don't want to do that. But the focus on them should shift to the focus on you, because that will guide you and move you along your path of recovery, maturity, healing, and transformation to finding the true you. Number 7, healing takes time, and it also requires some consistency, and that creates more recovery for us. Actually, sometimes healing can take place in an instant. I've had a shift in paradigm, subjectivity, emotional location in an instant before. And then other times I've had to work on that and prepare to give birth to the new insight. And somebody had to help me as a midwife to, have the baby of that insight. So it can take 9 months, so to speak, or it can be in an instant. And I think both I've found to be true. But it can often take time. And that requires changing the pattern, walking on the road, continuing on that road, in spite of the toxicity and dysfunction of others. Number 8. I think about gaining a sense of calmness by thinking about the statement, and I think there's even a book by this title. The situation is hopeless, but not serious. I want to reduce that anxiety that I have. For example, if you have a narcissistic parent, the situation with them is hopeless. They're going to always be a narcissistic parent. But it doesn't have to be that serious, because you can parent yourself, you can do for yourself and care for yourself in ways you couldn't do when you were a child. And that because they are narcissistic doesn't have to mean that much. If they're going to behave that way, then I may want to distance myself from them. I may want to go no contact with them. Or as Dr. Henry Cloud in his book calls it, necessary endings if they don't change. And so them calling you stupid may be hopeless, but it's not serious. It's toxic nonsense. Why am I getting all upset about their view of the world? Their view of the world is not well. They are mentally ill, and you won't be able to change that. So it is hopeless, but it doesn't have to be that serious. So what? So what if they think I'm dumb? So what if they think I'm a horrible child? Just like when I said, well, Mom, I guess I'll just have to be the bad son. So what if I'm the bad son? I'm fine, because I don't really even think I'm being a bad son. I'm dealing with the realities that I have to deal with. Number 9, self-differentiation is the goal for recovery. Becoming yourself without absorbing the feelings and toxicity of others. Being your genuine self while still staying connected to others, but not absorbing their dysfunction or toxicity. And I think that's a very important goal that really provide a lot of freedom, clarity, awareness. In fact, I think it's the work of self-differentiation is to become more self-aware, more self-regulated, and more self-differentiated. Those are all key things in the recovery process, growing up in a narcissistic home. And if anybody's got CPTSD, trauma from abuse, any of these kinds of dysfunctions, growing up in an alcoholic home, growing up in a narcissistic home, growing up with sexual abuse, any number of things, these things are so important to learn. self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-differentiation. If you're ready to finally break free from the grip of narcissistic parent abuse and build a strong, confident sense of self, join my free training. It is the free training I'm talking about. Doesn't cost you anything. You can go to my website. I think there's a link below. That is totally free. The Road to Self is a much more in-depth program, and that does have a cost to it. Learn to build the self you are never allowed to have is the free training. Click the link below to get started. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be alerted when new videos come out, which I publish and post weekly. It's time to get your family out of you and finally live as your true differentiated self. I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day and be wise.